Number 1. Felvidek. This game takes the shape of a bleak little JRPG road trip through 15th century Slovakia, but viewed through the eyes of a knight who has made alcohol into a lifestyle rather than a hobby. The hero here is Pavel, a grinning disaster in plate armor, sent out from his lord's castle to investigate raids, fires, and general spiritual rot spreading through the Slavic highlands while he clutches a bottle like it's standard equipment. You march a small party across grainy, heavily dithered black and white landscapes that look like someone shoved Baldur's Gate and an old Game Boy camera into the same cartridge and then ran it through the Obra Dinn's filter for good measure. When it's time to fight, the game doesn't throw random encounters at you. There's no character levels at all, in fact. Instead, battles are scripted story events. Reach a key location or push a scene forward and the screen snaps into a first-person combat view. You trade turns and watch some wonderfully crude attack animations and then drop back onto the map and keep moving right along. Most of the work is in choosing gear, drinking the right horrible liquor, or deciding when the knight should spit explosive booze at someone instead of using a sword, which is probably not how chivalry was meant to go, but it is memorable as hell. The weird oogie of this game is how it mixes low fantasy horror, real historical tensions, and extremely specific Slavic pop culture jokes, and then delivers the whole thing with the timing of a deadpan comedy. In one instance, you could be dealing with raids or religious politics, and the next you're using a local moonshine gag item from a 1970s Slavic comedy film as a legitimate combat technique. Because every fight is hand-placed rather than farmable, the game never turns into a grind. Each encounter feels like punctuation in a 5-ish hour story that swings between bleak and absurd, with surprisingly slick guitar-heavy soundtrack that pushes it along. The result plays like a lost medieval chronicle that someone wrote after 3 drinks and a few tabs of acid, and somehow that combination lands as one of the stranger, sharper little RPGs of the last few years. Number 2. The Upturned. Checking into a hotel for the dead is already a bad sign, but in The Upturned, it is just the start of your evening. The Upturned Inn is a towering, crooked stack of floors, each one with its own little disaster. Glass pane factories, aquariums where the exhibits are not entirely behind glass themselves, abandoned malls, and cardboard Wild West towns that would fail every safety inspection. You'll be riding a battered elevator in third person and scurry out onto each floor to hunt for power fuses or nodes that will get the lift working again. Survival looks like a mix of frantic platforming and improvised defense. You grab chairs, boxes, signs, anything that is not nailed down, and then hurl it at whatever angry guest is bearing down on you, sometimes upgrading to the very dignified tactic of throwing birds at other birds because the game explicitly allows it. Between runs through these 30-odd floors, you'll get calls from Ick, the unnervingly cheerful host who checks in on your ascent and treats the whole ordeal like slightly hectic customer service. The hotel is built like a haunted funhouse, full of themed floors and surprise guests, but the tone swings toward dark comedy, with Ick phoning you for things like friendship quizzes and offhanded comments about boss music. Even the name entry screen commits to the weirdness by refusing you a backspace, so whatever nonsense you type becomes your permanent afterlife identity, which feels entirely in character for a place this unhelpful. At the end of the day, what we're dealing with here is a damn good time. A fast, strange hotel climb where cosmic horror is always in the background and getting to your room starts to feel like the least reasonable thing that you could hope for.
Number 3. Death of a Reprobate. Reprobate.
No, come on, say it. Come on, you got it. Number 3, come on.
Number 3. Death of a Reprobate.
So, the game looks like someone broke into an art museum after closing time and installed an adventure game where a fire exit should be. You guide Malcolm, a fairly hopeless man in very expensive brushstrokes, through a stitched-together world of Renaissance and Baroque paintings that have been cut up, rearranged, and told to act like a village. Saints loom overhead and peasants gossip in oil while you rummage through bins and barter with clergymen who absolutely should not be saying the things that they are saying. You'll point, you'll click, you'll combine ridiculous items in your inventory and then hand them to people who really belong in a theology textbook, all while a very proper classical soundtrack tries its best to pretend nothing unusual is happening. The puzzles mostly exist to keep you moving through new screens and into fresh visual punchlines, like a walking tour where every stop is another painting that has given up on being dignified. The draw here, what makes this game delightfully strange, is how it completely throws itself to that collision between reverent art and completely irreverent writing. The framework is a traditional point and click, but the tone lives somewhere between Monty Python sketch and late night forum thread that escaped moderation. And the contrast between these worlds is a little unstable, but it's in the best ways possible. The game will repeatedly ask you to perform good deeds for people who are petty or just openly awful, and then play those errands for comedy rather than moral sermon, which somehow lands closer to honest human behavior than a lot of straight-faced RPGs do. Underneath the jokes, though, the whole thing is tightly paced, visually memorable, and surprisingly approachable, with puzzles that want you to feel clever rather than punished. It is weird because it should not work at all, and yet it does, turning centuries of serious paintings into a short, sharp comedy about bad people trying to be slightly less bad, and making that museum trip feel like a place you might actually want to revisit. Number 4. Perfect Vermin. Here you're inserted into a beige corporate labyrinth and handed a sledgehammer, which is honestly one of the most honest depictions of office work in years. You'll wander through cubicles, conference rooms, bathrooms, smashing anything and everything, looking for that invariable stealthy meat pinata. Hit a normal chair and it'll splinter like furniture. Hit the wrong one and it ruptures into voxel meat, twitching and pulsing as if the building has opinions about being redecorated. A timer nags you along while each new floor feels more stripped, more uncanny, like the office itself is being peeled back layer by layer and you're the world's least qualified exterminator. From 1,000 yards out, it seems kinda simple. You just find the imposter object, but in practice, you're running around an office building whacking toilets to see which one explodes into viscera, which is several steps past quirky indie and well into HR does not have a form for this territory. Violence becomes your only investigative tool. You don't examine objects, you just hit them until they either behave like furniture or act like a living tumor. The game never really pauses to explain why any of this is happening, and then it ends before you can mentally file it under a normal horror category, leaving you with the distinct impression that you've just acted out someone's very specific workplace anxiety dream and did a worryingly good job at it. Oh yeah, and as if you needed another reason, it's free. Number 5. Art is Rifle. I want you to imagine a first-person shooter where the level looks unfinished on purpose, and your rifle has picked up a second job as both paintbrush and drumstick. Are you imagining it? Well, the game you're imagining is Art is Rifle, and this game drops you into an open landscape of stark structures, floating platforms, and clean geometric shapes that ask you to start firing colored shots into walls, pillars, and cubes to see what changes. Surfaces soak up colors and react in different ways, opening doors, extending bridges, or rearranging whole sections of the arena as you experiment. Every bullet that lands triggers a percussion hit. Different objects play different notes, so movement, jumping, and puzzle solving gradually turn into a kind of improvised drum solo that the soundtrack keeps trying to keep up with. There is no HUD cluttering the screen, information lives in the environment as physical objects, and if the neon overload gets too intense, there is even a quick way to drain the color and give your eyes a breather while you think. The world is technically an open one, so you can wander off mid-puzzle and pick up another structure somewhere else, fast traveling through the space using mechanics instead of menus, which feels less like choosing a level and more like getting distracted inside of a very strange outdoor gallery. Puzzles are built to allow multiple solutions, tutorials are optional, and the game quietly judges your observational skills by making the answers feel obvious only after you stumble onto them. This is a shooter that treats aim, timing, and curiosity as one big instrument, and the weirder you play it, the more interesting the song gets. Number 6 is Keeper. A lighthouse with legs is not the usual starting point for an adventure game, but Keeper treats it like it's the most natural thing in the world. You control this newly awakened tower as it tramps across a post-human landscape, its beams sweeping over rusted machinery, fossilized sea life, and strange growths that respond to light like plants leaning toward the sun. A small seabird known as Twig flits along beside you, tugging vines, pecking at switches, and generally handling all the hands-on work you cannot because you are, again, a building. Together, you cross forests, caverns, and forgotten coastal ruins in slow, continuous journeys, solving environmental puzzles by redirecting the lamp, charging devices, and shielding your companion from a creeping parasitic presence known as the Wither. There are no cutscenes full of exposition, nor any dialogue boxes. The world, the animation, and the sound design do all the talking while you just walk, tilt the lamp, and watch spaces unfold in front of you. Puzzles will grow right out of the scenery, so often you just stumble into a structure and then poke at it with light until it reveals what it wants. The art direction pulls from surreal illustration and classic fantasy films, so every new region feels like it was built for you to shine a beam across it and see what reacts. And by the time the credits roll, it's hard not to feel oddly protective of this little clanking tower and its very patient bird. It's a very unique type of adventure, where the strangest thing is not that you play as a sentient lighthouse, but how quickly that actually just starts to feel normal. Number 7 is Mohrta. Mohrta drops a metal-wrapped corpse into a place that looks like a forgotten Dark Souls prototype rebuilt inside the Doom engine. You play as a Hayward Generation 7 Enforcer, a body hauled back from the dead and locked in armor, sent into the strange to track down a rogue of your own order. From a dense bazaar hub stuffed with odd merchants and occult machines, you wander out into 5 sprawling dimensions in whatever order you feel like, each with its own mood and rules. From airy temple ruins high above the clouds to cavern systems lit by bioluminescent fungus. Combat keeps that GZ Doom snap to movement and shooting, but the pacing leans closer to a dungeon crawler, with long sections of exploring and route finding between sharp, punishing encounters. What really pushes it into properly weird territory is how casually the game presents its own strangeness. Healing comes from squeezing a living doll that wriggles in your hands like an unnervingly personal first aid kit. Your magic reserves get boosted by a teal lion in a fez enjoying a hookah, and your weapons are reforged by a colossal steam-powered smith that turns out to be piloted by a smug little imp sitting in the control room. The hub feels like a dream bazaar built out of Morrowind back alleys and Planescape concept art, packed with odd NPCs who hand out quests, hints, and quiet threats as if this is just another Tuesday. Levels loop back into that space through elevators, shortcuts, and hidden doors, so over time the whole structure starts to feel less like a set of levels and more like one big knotted world that you're slowly untying. The result is a slow, heavy retro FPS that treats every gun, corridor, and boss arena as an excuse to show you one more bizarre corner of its own universe, and it works well enough that Souls-like on a Doom engine stops sounding like a joke and starts feeling suspiciously sensible and fun. And number 8, Arctic Eggs. In a gray Antarctic city where industry has frozen over into apartment blocks and smoke, your entire future is balanced in a single non-stick frying pan. Arctic Eggs is a sci-fi cooking game where you shovel through a low-poly settlement in the late 21st century, taking orders from strangers and then stepping up to your pan to make their food behave. Your movement is basic WASD, but the real game lives in the mouse, tilting the pan to generate heat, flicking your wrist to flip eggs, bacon, tin fish, and whatever the hell else they throw at you, trying not to lose anything over the edge. Items all cook differently, from cans that need to be heated until they burst to more exotic requests that bounce, roll, or threaten to explode if you get cocky. Between cooking jobs, you wander the frozen streets, talking to residents who look like they escaped from a cursed PS1 tech demo, delivering monologues about stingrays, mechanical organs, and bad life choices while you stand there holding a pan. It's all very straightforward to describe, dry, but it's incredibly strange to sit with. The writing stays humorous and slightly broken, full of self-correcting typos and throwaway lines about girlfriends, flamingos, and drinking habits, so the jokes land more as odd little confessions than punchlines. Arctic Eggs ends up feeling like a physics toy, a cooking sim, and a very grungy existential crisis sharing the same burner, and somehow that mix comes out cooked just right.